Hi there. I'm David Batshoffen, and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. And I'm doing a series of online chats called In Conversation With. And today I'm talking to Michael Canfield, who is I don't really know how to describe him, a musician amongst other things, but a musician of a slightly different ilk, I think. Michael, how are you?
I'm fine, David. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. I do like the beard.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
just want,
Nicole Turan, my wife, was a big advocate, and so you know what Mama wants, Mama gets.
hey, I'm in a similar boat, but and then I say to my wife says to me, but you're looking very woolly, so I go and have it trimmed, and she said, I like woolly. So you can't win, you know. It's
It
just
is.
it's just interesting, you know, Michael, that in these strange times that we currently find ourselves, how many men have started growing a beard? Because there's nothing stopping you from actually shaving if you really want. It wasn't in amongst the lockdown rules that you couldn't shave.
Well, for me, I mean, Nicole and I live down here in Tulbagh on this homestead. We're
Right.
off the grid, kind of in a community of farmers and artists and other quirky eccentrics. And I started growing this beard a long time ago. Actually, um, we've been here now full time 3 years. I haven't had a haircut in 3 years, and all I've done is sort of shape this beard into kind of wrestle it into submission over that time, and that's it. Yeah, so yeah, that's where we are. You know.
Michael, people will hear the accent and go, he's not South African, and you're not. So tell us what brings you to our shores and how long you've been here.
Well, I came to South Africa for the first time in 1995. I was approached by a colleague of mine in America, a musician that I'd done a lot of work with. And as you pointed out, besides being a musician, I've always been the business guy on the side of in kind of our school of musicians.
Right.
I'm the one who was able to write business plans and grants. And if somebody had a recording contract offered, they would come to me and say, take a look at this, because I just had spent time, I'd invested my time in learning that. So back in 1994, I got a call from my friend George Worthmore, the band leader, George Worthmore and the Dive Bombers. And he said, and I have to do his accent because if you think I have an accent,
Yeah.
you know George. Yeah.
Yes.
I'd left New York City and I was living very much in a town like Tulbagh, except by the sea on Cape Cod, called Sandwich.
Right.
Magnificent town, oldest town on the Cape. And so I get this call from my friend George. Hey, Michael, I met these crazy people from Johannesburg, South Africa. They want to open an American-style nightclub there. I told them I could help them with the music, but they got to talk to you about the business. So I went down to New York City and met with the couple who then opened, who wanted to open the venue. I wrote them a business plan, a marketing strategy. I charged them a nice fat fee and figured I'd never hear from them again. Lo and behold, in August of 1995, I get a call from George. Hey, Michael, those crazy, and I won't use the expletive you used to describe, are not only opening the venue in December, but they want us to come and play the opening. So in December of 1995, I came over to Johannesburg and was part of an opening of a venue called the Blues Room. Back in those days, it was at Thrupp Center upstairs, where it ultimately became TGI Friday. I don't know what it is now. And we played there. I came back and forth. I had no clue about South Africa. I was a typical provincial American
Mm.
who, for me, Africa was Tarzan movies, necklacing, um, Nelson Mandela, and the townships. But when I came to South Africa, I had a completely different experience and fell in love with the people, fell in love with the country, started coming back and forth more and more often and staying longer and longer until finally the opportunity presented itself at the end of 96 for us to acquire the Blues Room. George moved over first. I came over here full time in 1997, and I've been here ever since. Permanent resident. I haven't been back to the States since 2000.
You're not missing much.
Not today. Woo, well, I'm missing a lot, but ooh, I'm glad. I'd be one of the ones they'd be worried about. So
You're one of the aliens they won't allow back in, Michael.
oh, it's no, it's I mean, we could go on and on about that. It's such a heart-rending experience
Yeah.
to observe what's happened and what is happening still
Mm.
in my country. You
Yeah.
know, the the hatred, the hate speech, the violence, the denial of fact, the denial of reality, the fact that somebody can be so ego driven to put their personal political career ahead of an entire country. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I've lost um, 5 close friends and associates in New York City to the virus.
Yeah.
And it's only beginning around the other parts of the country where I've lived and worked now,
Mm.
Alabama, Tennessee, South Florida, Austin, Texas. It's playing politics with something as virulent as this pandemic
Yeah.
is not something I have a lot of respect for, and like I said, it's heartrending.
It's like wrestling with an alligator. Eventually, one of them will get you.
What does that again say?
I said it's like wrestling with an alligator. Eventually, one of them will get you.
Yes, exactly.
Michael, try if you would to describe, because when people talk to me about, when I've spoken to people about you and your music, and I've tried to describe the type of music that you play because I love what you do. Sort of one man band is what immediately springs to mind, but that's not quite what it really is.
Well, I my solo act, this kind of boogie thing that I do,
Yes,
is inspired, influenced, based on street musicians in New Orleans.
right.
Guys, if you're walking down Bourbon Street or Franklin Street, somebody like me would be tucked up against the wall in front of a venue with a few instruments and this weird assemblage of percussion gear, and they'd be singing and playing and working for tips.
Yeah,
And when the economies of working with a band shifted so dramatically in the noughts, I needed to do something. And I had gotten out of performing. I used my entrepreneurial side, and I created a company called Tixa, which is a ticketing company. And I was the CEO of that for 5 years. And then when I got back performing, keeping a unknown 5-piece band alive was not real. I started during the Tixa days traveling around the country opening offices, and I was going crazy not having any music. So I got myself a 4-string baritone ukulele on
right.
Amazon because I couldn't find, because my dad had taught me to play it when I was a little kid. I mean, not much, the guy who sponsors my gig acts, my Brian Fanner guitar, joke that, I could have made you a 5-fret guitar and probably had 2 frets too many because I don't really move very far up the neck. But I started fooling around with this thing just to entertain myself at night in hotel rooms
Right.
in Umfolozi or down in the Eastern Cape and then how it goes. You start bringing it out at parties, and one thing led to another, and somebody offered me a gig. Actually, Brian Green from 44 Stanley, and now what's his new venture? That
Escapes me right
Victoria
now.
Yards.
Yeah,
Victoria Yards.
Victoria Yards. Yeah.
Yeah, come and play at my venue. And I went to the market and play, and I was like, I felt so naked sitting there with just this, that I started adding drums.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and then it became, I think you can see in the background.
I can see in the background, but have you got your ukulele close at hand though?
No, even worse. I have a banjo.
Oh, and this is where it all goes south, literally and figuratively.
What it is the music that I do loosely falls into the Americana category.
Right.
It's heavily influenced by the music of New Orleans and the blues and boogie woogie and the swing music of the 30s and 40s, all kind of put together. And my whole philosophy was, if I was going to do this one man thing, I had to do it in a way that felt like it had integrity to me, which meant no backtracks
Mm.
and no loop pedals, nothing like that. So everything I do is predicated on me making the music live right there in real time. Like Greg Georgiadis says, making music live right before your very ears.
But now you picked
And,
up a banjo. What people may not realize is that Steve Martin, the actor, is a very serious banjo player.
oh yeah, he's a genius. I mean, again, I play this thing, you know, like don't really need this part of the banjo except to connect it to this part of the banjo because I live down here. In what, if you watched Inside Llewyn Davis, the Coen Brothers film that was
Yes.
loosely based on the life of Dave Von Ronk,
Mm.
and in it, John, what's his name? You know who I mean? The actor who was with Roseanne Barr.
Oh,
Um,
yes, John
but
Goodman.
he's made a pardon.
John Goodman.
John Goodman, yeah. He plays a junkie jazz musician in the backseat of a car who's berating Llewyn Davis for his inability to play anything but cowboy chords.
You know, funny
So,
you'd picked up the banjo because they've just relocated. If you remember in Dueling Banjos, the seminal scene with the guitar and banjo duet
yeah.
on the Dueling Banjos. They relocated the guy that purportedly played the banjo because he didn't. It was other people's hands that were playing the banjo, but they've relocated him. He was paid like $50 or something for the role, and he's now working as he collects and cleans shopping trolleys at a Walmart somewhere in the southern states. And that was his moment of fame. They pulled him out of either an orphanage or a school. He was 10 or 11 at the time.
you know, I mean, what does that say about the way we treat art and artists?
Well, this is the sad thing. You know, I was talking with a friend a little bit earlier before you joined me, and we were talking about live theater and will it ever return? Because in its current form, to open a 500-seater venue to 50 people is not worth it on by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I mean, you know, a guy that I work with in New York City, his name is Rob Stoner. His dad was Arthur Rothstein. Now, Arthur Rothstein took many, many iconic images of the Dust Bowl, of the Great Depression. He ultimately went on to become the picture editor for Look magazine. But in his youth, when America went through the kind of upheaval that we're all experiencing now with the pandemic, FDR got the government together and said, right, we're not going to give these people handouts. We're going to find out what they can do, and we're going to put them to work. And they had the Works Progress, WPA, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and under all of that, they subsidized the theaters. They subsidized musicians to write music. They subsidized photographers to go out and take pictures, and so on and so forth. They built amphitheaters. They built parks. They did, and at least if some sort of genuine, support came through to the arts community, not just locally but internationally, the Germans are doing a great job of it. The Australians have just put together 150 million Aussie dollar budget to support the arts. In the UK, they've put together money to support the small music venues that are so necessary for up-and-coming musos to develop their craft. Here, I'm the vice chairman of the South African Musicians Support Association, which is it's modeled on Music Cares for the Grammys and the New Orleans Musician Support Association, which is there to be a safety net
Right.
for people. We've had no joy getting anything really through our government here. I don't know how we can, other than subsidizing theaters. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it scares me being 66 and seeing friends who were peers leave this mortal coil because of the virus.
Mm.
It frightens me to see some of the things that I'm starting to see, not just the guys in the States, the country music artists who are having fully fledged, 10,000 seat concerts with no masks, and they're resisting the whole, to here where I'm seeing people are skirting the edges of legality by doing an online broadcast with a crew and multiple artists, and all of a sudden, yeah, there's 50 people in the room, but
Mm.
geez, even that, when you think of the super spreader events that have been such a proven tracked um, beginning to birthday parties, one birthday party in one suburb in Connecticut is traced to 80% of the deaths
Yeah.
of the one birthday party. People just blew off the rules. I mean, I'm almost feeling like, even though we're far, far apart, you and I should have masks on. Where's my mask? Oh, no. I'm only talking to
There we
David.
go.
I'm
Michael,
only talking to David.
what took you to Tulbagh, of all places?
About 13 years ago now, maybe, I had it with Joburg, and I reconnected with an old friend who heard me on Keno Cummings' show, who sent me a message and saying, "Hey, I miss you. Come down to Cape Town and let's have a visit." And I went down to Cape Town and we had a visit, and it was a good friend of hers birthday that weekend. And she said to me, "Look, why don't you come with me? We're going to go to visit my friend in Tulbagh." Now, coincidentally, my attorney, Duncan Oaks, Sampson Oaks Higgins, and whatever that Danish, that big firm that used to exist in Santon, said, "Well, I own a farm in Tulbagh." And I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, you should check it out when you're down there." So I went down to Tulbagh, and like when I first came to South Africa, I fell in love. I love this place. It's quirky. It's filled with unusual people and artists. And at the time, there was a significant number of working musos already living here. A lovely theater sponsored and built by the Sarensburg Wine Estate. And it was one of those things where it just felt right. I'd had it with Joburg. My life in Joburg, I lived in this big house with a big garden. I had to have 2 gardeners and domestic workers and 2 different alarm systems because I was broken in. It was costing me 25,000 Rand a month to live in Joburg before I bought cat food. And I was like, I came down here, I found like a palace that had been built in 1790 on an historic street. Tulbagh has more national monuments on one street than any place in South Africa.
Really? Well, I'm now
30,
now hopefully I and our viewers have learned something this
yeah.
afternoon.
Well, what happened was in 1969, what most people in the country, if they know Tulbagh at all,
Yeah.
know about Tulbagh is that in 1969, the largest earthquake ever to take place in sub-Saharan Africa
Okay.
happened. And the entire, what is now the historic district, Kirkstraat, fell down.
Oh.
And when it did, somebody found an old, very, very, very early photograph of Tulbagh from the 1800s that showed all of the original housing and all of the gables of the really historic homes.
Mm.
And the government at the time decided to rebuild to the original standard, and then designate all of those places as historical monuments. But people are
Wow.
living in, yeah. And so it's gorgeous. It really is. Tulbagh Church Street consistently gets voted as the most beautiful street in South Africa.
And how big is the resident population?
There's about 6,000 people in the whole valley.
Mm.
Tulbagh is unique because we're surrounded on 320 degrees by mountains. There's only 2 passes in and out to the village. And there's no reason to come here unless you're coming here. We're not on any main road. We come here. Tulbagh is a giant cul-de-sac,
Right.
but it's It's verdant and it's lush and it's fertile and it's wonderfully abundant. We grow everything from wine grapes to one of the largest suppliers, not only to Woolies and Pick and Pay, of stone fruit, peach, nectarines, plums. Even one of the major suppliers to Marks and Spencer is based in Tulbagh. Rhodes Fruit is
Mm.
based in Tulbagh.
But now, do you
And so,
live in the town, or are you living sort of? You said you're living off the grid.
yeah, no, Nicole and I live in a a repurposed container house complex that we built um, in on my friend's farm
Right.
that I, that because I came down 13 years ago and I was living on Church Street in one of those historic houses, and one thing led to another. I was back in Joburg. I met Nicole. We fell in love. She had two young kids, and had to go back to Joburg, but not before I infected Nicole with love of Tulbagh. I brought her
Ah,
down here and I introduced her to all my friends. They loved her. She loved them. She all fit. And so when Nicole's youngest got an opportunity, was taken to New Zealand with his birth dad, she turned to me and said, "Okay, let's go back to Tulbagh." And I was like, "Ah, okay, okay." Then we did. Took us about 8 months. We sold the house in Joburg, moved down here, and then we were blessed enough that we have a life tenancy on 10 hectares of land on a almost 60-hectare farm. And so we were able to build this container house, and we get our power from the sun, we get our water from the river. Many of our foodstuffs come from our neighbors and our own garden. Um, and I have the blessing of high-speed internet, so that I
that's
can
why
do
we were
things like,
able to talk.
yep, and also we've been able to do our broadcasts and concerts from here. I've also been able to record and send tracks remotely to people in Joburg and around the world. So it's we're lucky.
The
We're
best of
really
every
lucky.
world. But don't you miss, as a musician, don't you miss being on the road, Michael?
Oh,
Driving from venue to venue, meeting new people.
well, okay. Back about 18 months ago, maybe almost 2 years ago, um, Nicole and I made a decision that we were going to focus. We like being together. We work really well together. We have a really good rapport musically, and people enjoy seeing. And we were going to focus, after me spending 3 years building a good foundation, re-entering back into business and getting the festivals and getting all those things. Um, we were going to focus on Toronto and Canfield. Now, Nicole had never been on the road. So I introduced her to the road, and she, like me, who's been a road rat since I was 9 years old, fell in love with that. Get in the car, go to the next town. The challenge of sitting in front of a group of strangers,
Mm,
of all of these disparate people, and turning them into an audience, and leaving not only with having delivered an experience to that audience, but having made friends and fans, and then
yeah.
moving on, then moving on. We were up until so we worked really hard to build that. The first third of this year, we we did 22 shows in 8 provinces, and then came back. And interestingly enough, we were planning to be off that whole period when the first 21 days of the lockdown
Mm,
started. We were planning to be here for the first time, and the period where the lockdown ended, allegedly was going to end, was going to be our first Reap the Reward tour of 5 years of Michael Canfield's very hard work.
I
We
like
had,
that reap the rewards tour.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we had 25 shows booked in every province and Swaziland and Mozambique. Big
Right.
festival, all canceled, all gone. That was projected to be 60% of our 2020 income.
Yeah.
Gone. Now, um, I miss the money, but I really miss the audiences. And even
Yeah.
more than missing the audiences, I miss the experience. I miss that you get up in the morning, you get in a car, you drive through this magnificently beautiful country that we live in. It's stop at little pod stalls and experience like the best apple. You know that the best apple pastry you've ever had in your life is between here and Port-Profile.
You know,
It's little pod stall on the side of the road,
you
and you know.
you say that, Michael. When I was still with a particular radio station, I'd interviewed a woman who ran one of those little putt stalls and who said that her burgers were the best burgers in South Africa. I think it was a burger. Yes, it was. So I was in Cape Town with my wife. My daughter lives in Cape Town, and we decided to take the drive to this little putt stall, which was over 200 kilometers away. But we figured we had nothing else to do, so we'll drive there and drive back. Suffice it to say that they were the worst burgers that we have ever eaten. But
Well,
bless her, she not only gave us the burgers, she then gifted us with a variety of different biscuits and cook sisters and stuff, all of which I think were baked by the same person. Because when we got back to Cape Town and tried to give them to people on the side of the road, one guy actually took a bite and offered to hand it back to us. He didn't like the bite. So I've learned to be a little judicious about putt stalls. But like you, having lived in small town South Africa for a year, I love the people. I love the vibe of the towns. Yes, everybody knows your business. They find you walking down a main street at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. They'll say, but you had a doctor's appointment. Why are you here? Type of thing. Because they know where you're meant to be and where you're not meant to be. But, and I'm sure it's like that in certain parts of America as well, where it's just South Africa with an accent.
yeah, no, exactly. Small towns are small towns,
Yeah.
everywhere. But in defense of my statement about apple pie, it's only experiential. I'll stop. I'll go, that looks like an interesting place, and I'll stop and I'll try what looks interesting. And then once I find, some have been abysmal experiences. You walk in, and you mentioned earlier the scene in Deliverance.
Yes.
Da-da-da, that's the soundtrack. You walk into the place, and that's the soundtrack that goes through my head.
Yeah, if you hear banjo music, leave.
Pardon?
If you hear banjo music, leave.
Yes, unless it's me, of course.
Unless it's you, yeah.
But small towns are small towns. You're gonna have that, and I've been lucky enough in my life to have lived in some. But interestingly enough, I mean, I've also lived in Manhattan, in New York City, and the music business in New York City is as a smaller town. The entertainment industry, the arts business, as a smaller town with as many personality quirks and talking behind their back, and who doesn't want that, and that one said, she said, and why did you, and did you hear about? So, just like the music business in Joburg, I would say.
Yeah,
The
like
arts business.
it's in any way.
We've known each other probably the whole length of time I've been in South Africa.
Yes.
And all because of the vector of the Blues Room, and we know basically everybody who needs to be. We can talk to anybody in the industry.
Yeah. Listen, I remember going to talk to George one evening. I was desperate for food. I was living alone, doing stand-up comedy, and I said to him, "I'll work for food. If you give me a meal, I'll do comedy." And you remember the Blues Room, it wasn't designed for stand-up comedy because you had a bar behind you. You had people all over the place. And all it took was one person standing at the bar going, "Really, do we need this? We've come here for a drink, not to be interrupted." But bless George, he did give me a meal. So I survived the night.
Well, it's coming to that for a lot of artists. I mean, we've been blessed that between our patrons, fans, and other support that we've had, up until now, we've made it. The online concerts put enough in the coffers to keep us and the dogs fed, and to keep the most important thing that we have, our biggest expense every month, cell phones and data.
Right.
Because without that, we're out of business.
Yeah. Was Nicole a performer when you met her, Michael?
Nicole has been a musician since she was 3.
Okay.
She's been writing songs her whole life, but she, unfortunately, unlike me, came from a background where she was told that if she became an artist, they would rather that and other parents have done this to children. I don't understand. They would rather she be dead than
Yeah.
become an artist. And in her prior marriage, her work was, so she had to learn to write surreptitiously and hide. But Peter Perlson, who is a mutual friend and of yours and mine and of Nicole, he and then Matthew Lesher, the guy who did Josie Field.
Oh, yes. I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, and Neil Solomon. She started being around music, and they heard her work, and they all started encouraging her and bringing her out. When I met her, she had just finished an album with Peter, and it was still not time for her to be out as a performer. It was a long, long road, and first for her to heal and establish confidence in herself.
Yeah,
that she had validity, and then we both had to overcome the God has a girlfriend and he thinks she can sing the syndrome. But that was, as soon as she opened her mouth and played one of her songs, that went by the wayside.
Yeah.
And I was able to open a lot of doors for her and for us, But no, she was a songwriter and singer and pianist when I met her, but not a working performer.
Now, if on the road.
Like these long answers, by the way.
That's fine. It's fine. But when you went to a small town and they saw you setting up, were there people sort of hanging around in the foyer going, "What have we got ourselves into? This doesn't look like any concert we've ever come to see before"?
The answer, yes. Absolutely. And even more than that, I mean, look at me. I'm 66 now. So I started doing this in my early 60s.
Right.
And this level of it. But the places that I was getting booked were Opie, the Good Luck Bar, the venues in Pretoria that are rock and roll venues. And so not only did they look at the gear and one eyebrow would go up, but they would look at me and they'd go, "What is this going to be?" Because I got put on the bill in front of bands like Aching and Francois Van Coke and the Black Cat Bones. And I'm out there in front of, the Good Luck Bar, 1,500 20-somethings. And I got very comfortable. I'm so comfortable as an artist. That drum kit is my universe.
Right.
I'm completely comfortable there. And so I would look at them elbowing each other. What is this old toppy? But that worked to my advantage because they underestimated me so greatly that I was able to just go out and grab them because I've got a lot of craft and a lot of experience. And I think that what I do has some validity. And so I would go grab them. But Nicole and I've had the people who don't know that Nicole is a native Afrikaans speaker.
Right.
We'll go to a venue down in the back of Beyond, and the two of us will be carrying this stuff in. Now, Nicole is 40. Looks like, when we're setting up, before she puts her makeup and stage costume on, she looks like, to some people, a Tani.
Yeah.
And, and we're carrying gear in, and she can hear people behind the bar. Oh, no. What is that? Oh, people have no idea. But then we do sound check, and they're on the phone calling their friends.
You should get here now.
You're going to love this.
Yeah.
So it's, I get lots of raised eyebrows, but now the secret is out, and the places that we play, people know what they're going to come, and they're coming for that for the most part.
You mentioned a range of percussion instruments, and years ago I was at a music festival in Ghana, and I can't remember who the band was, but it was a native Ghanaian. He'd worked in America for the longest time as a percussionist and decided to return to Ghana. And he arrived, and it took him virtually the entire morning to set up his backline, to set up his percussion, his array of percussion stuff. And he said his best was to go into a toy store and play with things. until he was walking through Toys R Us one day and he realized it was like the Pied Piper. He'd attracted an entire following because he was walking along, blowing in things, whirring things around, and just having an inordinate amount of fun. And do you do the same, Michael? Have you got stuff that shouldn't really be in a percussion lineup, but you've turned it into something like that?
Sure. Everything from tiny Rickoffy tins to I love going to the Rosebank Market and playing around with the Zulu rattles and the gourd maracas and things like that. Also, of course, I'm an avid and rather accomplished washboard player.
Aha,
I have a washboard that I brought with me to Africa.
right.
That's it's well over 100 years old, and
Wow.
yeah. As a matter of fact, before we went live, we were talking about our good friend Rail Burns, who just
Yes.
passed.
Yeah.
So I played. I recorded an album with Rail, with the Waldorf String Band,
Yeah.
and then did a number of shows with the Wall. And one of the things that I always would do is I loved it because I'd get to play the washboard with the Waldorf String Band.
And of course you can, because I was looking, when Rail passed a few days ago, and I went back because I was at the last concert that they did when Waldorf disbanded because Ian was ill, and I didn't realize that their last concert was in 2014, and then Ian died just about a year later in 2015. It's that long ago.
It's the last big project I did in Joburg was helping to build the sheds at One Fox,
Mhm.
the Good Luck Bar,
Yeah,
and that opened in October of 2014. And I'm like, how
where did
where
the,
was that? That was yesterday.
it was?
You
Where
know,
did the time go? 6 years ago.
well, the old cliche about when you're one, a year is your entire life. When
Yeah.
you're 66, it's 1/66th of your life, and it's accelerating. You
It
know,
is. It is indeed. So, where to for you and your wife now? Are you waiting to, like everybody else? I suppose I'm a non-traveling travel writer, and you're a non-performing performer.
we're going to keep doing the live performances.
Mm.
Matter of fact, I'm about to start doing something quite interesting. There's a little theater in this town, subsidized, created and subsidized by the Sarensburg Wines, and it's just being reopened and rebranded as a combination art gallery, and so I'm going to start doing a live from the Sarensburg series
Okay.
of broadcasts
Right.
where um, it's going to be music performances like so many people have done, and but the little quirk, as a matter of fact, can be even the official announcement. The quirkiness about it is that I'm kind of going to do a Jules Holland meets Michael Parkinson talk segment. You know,
Okay.
little music, very music focused interview and talk broadcast,
Mm.
leading towards when eventually it's small enough that we could be supported with 50
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
in the audience. But that's a ways away. I think. I don't think we're going to see that. We may not see that this year.
Yeah. The month, somebody said to me, "What day is it today?" I said, "It's what day?" Because I have no idea what the days are. They just roll into one into another, and I'm still amazed that people refer to a weekend as a weekend because it makes no difference to the majority of us that are in lockdown at home. And the months that are being bandied about, I was talking to a game lodge. They're looking to open the beginning of October. They're trying to take bookings because without bookings they can't open, and without being open they can't take bookings. So it's very much a catch-22 situation. And I should imagine for performers like yourself, without venues who are prepared to book you, it's difficult, but venues can't book because they don't know if audiences are coming. I mean, they can't have you arrive and there's nobody there.
I don't know. It's I have we'd built a sufficient business that I could pretty much count that if we drove to Neisner, 150 people would show up and pay $80 a piece for
Right.
us, and if we went to PE, I could get 100 people at $100 a piece, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. That I could sell out a venue in Joburg. I could do, but that was back when people would go out.
Yeah.
I'm very reluctant to put myself in the midst of 50 people right now.
Yeah. I had this very discussion this morning. This very discussion, Michael, is because you don't know where, if it's you and 50 people that you don't know who they are or where they've been. And is it worth it at the end of the day? Is it worth it for the venues to, if they're, even if it's a 200-seater venue, to only have 50 people, and then to have to pay to have the venue sanitized at the cost of 5,000 to 8,000 rand after every performance? They'll make nothing.
It's I I can only be baffled, and I can only go, I'm going to try to, we're going to try to keep ourselves sufficiently in focus, but the things we've had to let go of. I mean, the things like car insurance, medical aid, those are gone,
Yeah.
in order to live this life now. And there's no way to be able to afford them consistently.
Yeah.
I wish I could wave a magic wand and have an answer, but as you see what's happened in the States, when they've opened up, they've had huge waves of
Yeah.
infection. I mean, COVID-19 is officially now the number one killer on the planet.
Yeah.
Had malaria.
It's terrifying, and we in the creative industry have to deal with it. If you're sitting in an office or you're one of the 1%ers, this doesn't really affect your bottom line at all, because you could lose 100 million and still sleep very easily at night.
Yeah, I mean, and like the folks who I know who work for F&B, who are now working from home, or they're on a rotation in Bank City, where you work 1 week and then you're 2 weeks at home, and then you come into the office, and they're staggering, and that's great. And those people's salaries, like our government officials, their salaries haven't disappeared 100% either.
Yeah.
Us, we don't work, we don't get paid. In that
Exactly.
sense, like everybody in the townships and in the Cape. I mean, I don't know what to say to the folks that are getting angry and are very, very scared and the pressure that government is feeling to open up everything at the same time. We're heading towards a pandemic peak here in South
But
Africa now.
My late dad used to have a very nice saying in Afrikaans, which was, "Kom ons praat van blommetjies." Let's talk about flowers. In other words, let's move away from death, doom, and destruction and get back to why I wanted to talk to you, which is about you and concerts, online stuff. So have you done many? And if so, have they worked for you, Michael? Or is it all still part of the I don't know, sort of an apprenticeship that you've got to go through again to learn yet another skill in order to go online and to convince people to pay, I don't know, 60 or 70 rand to watch you on a TV?
Here's what I found. We've done 4 online broadcasts. We've done 3 together and 1 solo by me. Nicole has also done a private Zoom event, and we've put out pretty much every week. We try to put out some fresh content. I did the Vera Lynn song. I did a version of Hard Times. Nicole did Everybody Hurts, trying to put out to our fan base, because we've got close on 10,000 folks who follow us on social media. So we try to put stuff out all the time. Here's what we've learned. The only one that we've done that was behind a paywall was this past Sunday. I did a concert, and it was an absolute failure. That we had 6 people were willing to pay up front. Now, our other shows have been averaging 1,500 to 2,000 viewers. Our maximum was 3,500. We were part of the MTN Bushfire Swaziland Festival online. That
Mhm.
did close on 250,000 views and counting internationally so far. When we put, if you like our work and want to support us, as a little striper going across, or that's in the comments section, people are much more generous than once they see what they're getting. I subscribe to the theory that people want content to be free.
Yeah.
If you put it behind a paywall, unless you're the New York Times, people are not going to pay for it. But if you give it to them and they perceive value and they engage with you personally because they've seen you, they will support your work as a patron. And that's been proven out to us, and that's what's kept us alive. We've
Okay.
had people who have people have put as much as 5,000 Rand in the tip jar, and I don't call it a tip jar and I don't beg. I'm saying, look, this is the work we're doing. If you'd like us to continue to do this work, we require support. That means food, data, car payments, and so
Living
that's been the
expenses,
model
basically.
that works for me.
Yeah.
Is,
Have,
give it away and give people an opportunity to give. Ask them to give, as Amanda Palmer said in The Art of Asking.
yeah.
Learn to ask for them to give, and then they will, if you give them value.
If you build it, they will come, to quote Kevin Costner from Field of Dreams.
In a way, but you can build one of these paywall based. All of my friends who have done the ones behind paywall have not been happy with it.
Yeah. Michael, is there another one coming up? And if so, before I say goodbye to you, if so, how do people find out about it?
Yes, there's another one in planning now, and it's going to be the launch at the live from the Sarensburg event. That's going to happen probably sometime in the last week of July. People can find out about it in a few different ways. They can go to Michael Canfield Music on Facebook. They can go to Nicole Tehran Music, or they can go to Tehran and Canfield. Those are 3 discrete Facebook pages. All of the information will be there. Or they can find Nicole Tehran Music on Instagram as well. I have enough social media responsibilities.
We're too old for that. This has been In Conversation With. I'm David Batsoff, and he's Michael Canfield. Michael, thank you so much for being a guest.
You're welcome. It was a real pleasure and an honor, and great to see you, David.